The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground, as Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reed watched a black SUV pull through the gates. He had seen many recruits arrive over his 20-year career with the Navy SEALs, but something about today felt different. The vehicle stopped near the weapons facility, and out stepped a woman who looked nothing like the typical military personnel he was used to seeing. She was petite, maybe 5 feet 4 inches tall, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her civilian clothes, jeans and a plain black t-shirt, made her stand out among the uniformed soldiers moving around the base. But what caught Reed's attention wasn't her appearance. It was the way she carried herself. There was a confidence in her stride, a calmness in her posture that reminded him of seasoned operators who had seen real combat. The woman walked directly toward the shooting range where Reed was conducting morning training with his team. She carried a small duffel bag and wore sunglasses despite the early hour. As she approached, Reed noticed she moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood situational awareness. Her eyes, even behind the dark lenses, seemed to take in everything around her. "Chief Reed?" she asked, extending her hand. Her voice was steady, professional. "I'm Sarah Chen. I believe you're expecting me." Reed frowned slightly. He hadn't been told about any visitors, especially not civilians. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't have you on my schedule today." "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Sarah reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded document. As she handed it to him, Reed noticed her hands were steady, calloused in the way that came from years of handling firearms. The paper bore the letterhead of Naval Special Warfare Command, along with signatures he recognized from high up the chain of command. "Special Evaluation," Reed read aloud, his eyebrows rising. "Marksmanship assessment under combat conditions." He looked up at Sarah, then back at the orders. "It says here you're a civilian contractor, but it doesn't specify what kind of evaluation you need." Sarah adjusted her sunglasses. "I understand your confusion, Chief. I was told you'd be briefed separately, but apparently that communication didn't happen. I'm here to demonstrate certain skills that might be useful to your teams in the field." Reed had been in the military long enough to know that when orders came down with this level of classification, it was best not to ask too many questions. Still, his protective instincts kicked in. His range was active, his men were training with live ammunition, and now he had a civilian woman who wanted to join them. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is a live-fire exercise with some of the most advanced weapon systems in our inventory. My men are training for deployment. I can't just let a civilian walk onto my range without knowing exactly what we're dealing with." Sarah nodded, understanding his position. "I appreciate your caution, Chief. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people alive in the field." She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. "What if I told you I've been doing this kind of work for longer than some of your men have been alive?" Before Reed could respond, the sound of gunfire erupted from the range behind them. His team was working through precision shooting drills, and the familiar crack of rifle fire filled the air. Sarah didn't flinch at the sound, didn't even turn her head toward the noise. Most civilians would have at least startled, but she remained completely calm. "Look," Reed said, making a decision. "I'll let you observe today's training. You can see what we do, get a feel for how we operate. But I'm not putting you on the firing line until I know more about your background and capabilities." Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving. "That's fair, Chief. But I think you'll find that observation works both ways. You'll be watching me, but I'll also be watching your team. Sometimes an outside perspective can reveal things that aren't obvious from the inside." As they walked toward the range, Reed found himself curious about this mysterious woman. Her confidence wasn't arrogant or boastful. It was the quiet assurance of someone who had proven themselves under pressure. He had seen that same quality in his best snipers, the ones who could remain calm when lives depended on their accuracy. The training range stretched out before them, with targets set at various distances. Reed's team was working with standard-issue M4 rifles, practicing the fundamentals of marksmanship that formed the foundation of all their advanced skills. Sarah watched silently, her trained eye taking in details that most observers would miss. She noticed how each shooter approached their position, how they controlled their breathing, the smoothness of their trigger pulls. Reed watched her watching them, intrigued by the intensity of her focus. It was clear she wasn't just casually observing. She was analyzing, evaluating, learning. "Your men are good," she said quietly, not taking her eyes off the shooters. "Solid fundamentals, good discipline. The tall one on the left has a slight tendency to anticipate recoil, but overall this is impressive work. Reed was surprised by her observation. She was right about Petty Officer Johnson's anticipation issue. It was something Reed had been working with him on for weeks. "You have a good eye," he admitted. "It comes with practice," Sarah replied. "And speaking of practice, Chief, when do you think your men might be ready to see what a Barrett .50 caliber can do at extreme range?" The question caught Reed off guard. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle was one of the most powerful sniper weapons in their arsenal, capable of engaging targets at distances that pushed the limits of human skill and equipment. It wasn't something they brought out for routine training, and it certainly wasn't something most civilians would even know about, let alone ask to see. "The Barrett?" Reed repeated, studying Sarah's face. "That's not exactly standard equipment for basic marksmanship training. Why would you be interested in long-range precision shooting?" Sarah finally turned to look at him directly, removing her sunglasses for the first time. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and held a depth that spoke of experiences most people would never have. "Because, Chief Reed, sometimes the difference between mission success and mission failure comes down to being able to reach out and touch someone at a distance they never thought possible." Reed felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just casual interest she was showing. This was the voice of someone who had made those kinds of shots before, someone who understood the weight of what she was suggesting. As he looked into her eyes, he began to realize that Sarah Chen might be far more than the civilian contractor her paperwork suggested. Over the next hour, Sarah continued to observe the SEAL team's training with an intensity that made Reed increasingly curious about her background. She moved around the range like someone who belonged there, never getting in the way, always positioning herself where she could see clearly without interfering with the shooters. Her comments were sparse but consistently accurate, identifying small technical issues that even Reed's experienced eye sometimes missed. When the team took a break for equipment maintenance, Reed decided to test the waters. "Chen," he called out using the informal address he used with his operators. "What do you think about Petty Officer Martinez's stance?" Sarah glanced toward the young SEAL who was cleaning his rifle. "He's compensating for a minor vision issue in his left eye by tilting his head slightly. It's not affecting his accuracy at these distances, but it could become a problem in longer engagements where perfect alignment is critical." Reed stared at her. Martinez had never mentioned any vision problems, and his medical records showed perfect eyesight. But now that Sarah pointed it out, Reed could see the subtle head tilt she was referring to. It was so slight that it would take an expert marksman to notice it. "How could you possibly know about his vision?" Reed asked. "The same way you can tell when one of your men is having problems at home just by watching how they handle their weapon," Sarah replied. "Small signs if you know what to look for. In his case, the compensation is so automatic he probably doesn't even realize he's doing it." Reed walked over to Martinez during the break. "Hey Martinez, you ever have any issues with your left eye? Maybe some strain during long shooting sessions?" The young SEAL looked surprised. "Actually, yeah, Chief. Sometimes I get a little blurriness after extended range time. I figured it was just fatigue." "How did you know?" Reed glanced back at Sarah, who was pretending to examine one of the rifles while obviously listening to their conversation. There was more to this woman than anyone was telling him, and his curiosity was rapidly turning into genuine interest. When training resumed, Reed made a decision that surprised even himself. "Chen, you want to try a few rounds? See how our equipment feels compared to whatever you're used to?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing something in her mind. "Are you sure, Chief?" "Once I start shooting, there's no going back to just observing." There was something ominous about the way she said it, but Reed's pride as an instructor kicked in. He had trained some of the best marksmen in the world, and he was confident in his ability to